So do you want to maybe start by telling us a bit about your role in Holles Street?
Sure. So I work on the perinatal mental health team, and I'm the psychologist on the team. And I work with, there's a number of different clinicians on the team. So I work with psychiatrists, I work with social work, I work with a mental health nurse and a mental health midwife. And our team is replicated in the other Dublin maternity hospitals in the Coombe and the Rotunda, and also in the other three big maternity units around the country. So Dublin, or Cork, Limerick and Galway as well. So our job is to support women, as you guys are doing, across during their pregnancy and after their baby comes.
And this is a relatively new service into the hospitals, is it? Or how long has this been set up?
Yeah, so it was last year in 2019 that the government, I suppose, were starting to fund these teams and bring on more clinicians. So before that, in Holles Street, for example, there was the psychiatrist that I work with worked there, but he worked there part-time, and there was also a mental health nurse that worked there for a long time. So there was a service in Dublin, it was harder to access outside of Dublin. There was a service, but it was very limited because the psychiatrist worked part-time. So this is, I suppose, an expansion of what was already there, which is great.
That's amazing that it's being recognised by the government how important it is to
absolutely
mums. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Are there plans to kind of make it bigger, or is it?
Well, certainly I hope so. Yeah, I think it's really important to appreciate and understand that there's a really important, our mental health is as important as our physical health, and one influences the other. So it's really important that we continue to advocate for that and normalize that. And, you know, obviously there's still a lot of stigma around mental health. It's gotten a lot better over the years, but I think maybe when it comes to being a mum and having mental health difficulties, there can be still a lot of stigma, and women can maybe feel a little bit unsure about talking about it or sharing it with other people, because they naturally worry, maybe will other people think I'm not doing a good job, or maybe I'm not being a good mom, or sometimes people worry that their babies might be taken away from them, and none of those things are the case. So it's great that we're there, and I hopefully will continue to grow and expand.
It's also important to spread the word that you guys exist and you're there.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I certainly didn't hear about you until my GP suggested that I register with you guys and come in and have a chat.
Super.
That we were talking about when I was pregnant, and I was kind of suffering from a little bit of anxiety about my previous birth, which was 11 years ago. Juliet's 11 and Charlie's 9 months. And my GP suggested that I get in contact with you guys. And I thought my issue wasn't serious enough, or, you know, that you only dealt with really serious cases. But I just found the support was absolutely amazing. And I would highly recommend anybody who's pregnant or just had a baby and is concerned to get in touch with their GP and to get in touch with you guys, because it's
absolutely. Yeah, and thanks for saying that, Lucy, because it's really important, I think, to keep normalizing it and keep talking about it. And I suppose one of the really important parts of what we're doing in the service and across the 6 teams is to meet women when they feel they need some support, because we want to help you before it gets to the point that maybe you feel it's gotten more problematic in your life, or it's having more of an impact in terms of how you feel about yourself, how you feel if you're pregnant, or how you're feeling about your baby or the other relationships in your life. So it's brilliant to be able to meet women, and I suppose also offer a bit of information about what's normal, because certainly if it's your first pregnancy and your first baby, you've no barometer of what's normal. You haven't done this before. So sometimes it's just about talking through that, and there's lots of women who come and see us and they just check in with us once and they never need to come and talk to us again, and other women come and they check in with us for a longer period of time, but our job is to be there to support mums as and when they need it, and it's a privilege to do that. So it's fantastic, and it's really it is a privilege to be on a little bit of that journey with women as they go through this really important and transformative experience. So yeah, and just to pick up on what you were saying about your GP, so GPs refer into us, sometimes public health nurses make a referral, sometimes when women come in to the hospital for antenatal appointments, they might be chatting to the midwife or the doctor, and they may talk about how they're feeling, or they may be upset, and and feel they need a bit of support, and then we'll get a referral from the midwife. Or sometimes after the baby comes and you're on the postnatal ward and you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, we might then check in with you then before you go home. So there's lots of different ways to access us. It's not just through the GP. So it's just important to kind of be aware of that as well.
No, it's a great service. And I said, because I had one session while I was pregnant, and then it was lovely. The midwife on my ward then came up to me and said, "Oh, we noticed that you had met the doctor. Would you like her to come again and see you?" And I was feeling fine, but I just thought, oh, it would be lovely to see her and just to see kind of a friendly face in the hospital. And she came and she, we had another little chat, and it was
great,
really, really good. I highly recommend it. And I have a few questions that came in.
Brilliant, great.
And also there's a chat box on Zoom just to everybody who's watching. And if you do have any questions you'd like to ask Aoife, you can message them directly to me privately, and I can ask them on your behalf, or you can just put them up in the chat. Or if you've got any comments on what we're talking about, then please do pop them up, and just let us know maybe how you're feeling or how you're getting on. Because I know it kind of helps as well if mums share those feelings. And that's what Cara and I feel so passionately about, is just talking about the reality of motherhood and just kind of how we all struggle at certain points. So it's important to share that and just kind of talk about it and get it out there. So delighted to be able to do that this morning. So the first question we have is from a first-time mum of a 3-month-old, so congratulations. And she would be interested to hear Dr. Aoife's thoughts on the distinction between just sheer exhaustion and postnatal depression. My child is still waking to feed every 2 hours or so at night, so tough. Won't sleep in her crib, it's very hard to put to sleep, only naps for very short periods if I can get her to sleep in the day and hold her. And as a result is overtired and cranky, so I find it all very tough. And I think that's probably quite a universal question from mums.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you know the difference, and when should you go and talk to somebody?
It's a really good question. And I suppose, because the reality is when you have a baby, you're going to be sleep deprived. And when we're sleep deprived anyway, in any walk of life, we naturally get more anxious. That's just part of being sleep deprived. So to be able to know when you need a bit more support, or when it's maybe, like normal, is a really good thing to be wondering about. And I suppose there's a few things to look out for. So when if we're talking about just, not just, if we're talking about exhaustion, when it's exhaustion and maybe nothing more than that, is when you do rest, you feel rested after. You're able to know that, like, this is not going to go on forever. While it feels like it might go on forever, it is temporary. One of the challenges is that you don't necessarily know when it's going to end. You don't have a date in mind. The baby's not able to tell you, I'm going to start really sleeping a lot better now on this particular date. So there's an uncertainty around that, and that's really challenging. But the other thing, in terms of, is it exhaustion or is it something more, is knowing that you still find lots of joy in things. So you might still, even though you're very tired, you still enjoy being with the baby. You still don't, it's not hugely burdensome to keep doing all the things that you're doing in terms of just the practical care of your baby. You still have a sense of, that you're doing a good job, and that you're getting through it, and it might be difficult, but it's going to pass, this period of exhaustion. So that will be where it's exhaustion. When it maybe is more than that, is where you start to worry about the job you're doing, and really believe maybe that you're not doing a good job, or start to think that maybe your baby would be better off without you, or you notice that you're more irritable. You notice that even when you sleep, you still feel absolutely exhausted, both physically and emotionally. You might find that your relationships with your partner or with other people close to you in your life are being affected, and you might find that you're very irritable a lot of the time, and you may find that you just have lost all interest in things, and including the baby. So that would be where it's starting to veer into maybe more significant difficulties, that it would be really important for you to seek some support around. So that would kind of be the things to look out for when you're looking to see, is it exhaustion or is it more than that?
And maybe, I suppose, the initial, what you're saying about support and how important that is, and that was a big part of my So my kind of postnatal plan was to
Mm-hmm.
just surround myself with support. And I only learned that from having had a baby and have had not having the support and thinking I
Yeah.
could do it all by myself.
Yeah.
And that, getting the people around you. And I suppose it's difficult now with these times of COVID, but just, that there are the lactation consultant, there is the sleeping consultant that you can contact online. Maybe that, that could be your first point of call, just to see if
Absolutely.
there's any help you can get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like the biggest toxin, if you like, to our mental health at any point in our lives, but particularly when you have a baby, is isolation. It's really important to identify who your supports are, and they may not be family. We all have very complex relationships with our families, as much as they might be wonderful. Some and that's on a sliding scale. Some people have very supportive relationships with family, others don't, and that's okay. And then it is about identifying who are the people or who are the services or the supports that I can access that will be giving me that help that I need. The other thing in all of that is that sometimes women feel a huge pressure to do everything themselves, and they can have maybe a bit of a faulty belief that if I'm not doing this all myself, I'm not being the best mom I can be to my baby. And that's a little bit distorted, I suppose, in terms of how we think about it, because the old saying of it takes a village to raise a baby is absolutely true. It's too much to expect one person to do every single thing for a baby, because babies need so much care and support, and they're very demanding, and hopefully it's an enjoyable experience, but it's also really challenging. So it's really important to seek out support in whatever form that comes in, and it can be friends and family, or it could be friends and family and other people too. So it's exactly as you said, Lucy, it's really important to identify all of that as much as you can before you have your baby, because it's really, for you and your baby, it's the best route to go to think about that. Absolutely.
And we've just had a kind of a follow-on question that's come in. Is it normal to take the lack of naps as a personal failure, finding it hard to have some perspective sometimes? It's so tough to live with naps. You just need them to nap so you can get your 5 minutes to scroll around, or
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So sometimes, I suppose, we should never underestimate the impact of sleep deprivation on how we think about things and how we're feeling, because it's, the reality is that sleep deprivation is used as a form of torture. So we need to be thinking about that in terms of how difficult it is to not get sufficient sleep. And for any of the mums out there who have maybe had babies before, or who have babies who are a bit older, what it's like to get maybe a 5-hour block, and you just feel like a new person, and you can't even remember when you had that experience before. So that's how powerful it is to get sufficient sleep. So when we don't get sufficient sleep, it really does cause a lot of difficulties for us. So when you're having that experience of feeling like you're taking it personally, it is personal on one level, because it's happening to you, but your baby doesn't have the capacity to be controlling or manipulative. They don't have their brains haven't developed to that point yet. So it's never personal to you. It may be that your baby just has a little bit more difficulty soothing and settling to sleep and staying asleep. And obviously, as you said, Lucy, accessing support around sleep is a really good thing to do. And some babies need a lot more support around their sleep than other babies. And it's no reflection on you as a mom. It's just that your baby is a little person themselves, and they have their own little temperament, which develops later into their little personalities. So they're letting you know what they need or what they're finding difficult, and they do that by their crying, by being maybe more restless, by needing more physical support from you. So some babies really love being held, and they really don't like when you put them down, and they find that very difficult. Other babies are happy either way. And again, it's no reflection on you or your parenting or your care of your baby. It's just that we also have to factor in that your baby is as an individual themselves, and they will dictate some of this in terms of the efforts that you're putting in and their responses to it. But it's not personal to you. If you like, they're not doing that they don't have the capacity yet to consciously think, I'm going to stay awake so mum doesn't get any sleep. They themselves are trying to figure that out, and they can't do it alone. That's why babies are so vulnerable. They're not ready, and reason for that is because our brains are so complex. we're different from other mammals. We don't just get up after birth and start walking around. We have very complex brains, so they need a lot of time to develop. But every day your baby is developing thousands, billions of new neural connections all the time. So that's all happening in the background as well. So it is really challenging when your baby isn't sleeping, and I greatly empathize with any mums out there who are experiencing that. But it's never, it's always good to seek support around that. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time for that to click in for your baby. But just know that you're doing a really good job, and mind yourself in that. And how you talk to yourself around all of that is also really important.
Yeah, such a good point. And I remember with Charlie, trying to get him into a routine and trying to get him to nap, because I'd read the book and it said this is what he should be doing, and it just wasn't happening. And it got to the point where I just thought, I've just got to do what I have to do to get the baby to sleep. So if that did mean me lying on the bed and him lying on top of me when I was told we should always have him sleeping in the crib, I was like, well, no, he needs to just lie on top of me, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to close my eyes for a few minutes. So sometimes you just do what you got to do just to get.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. So like reading books, getting access to information, really, really important. The thing to really remember is that your baby is going to give you the most information, because a book is helpful, but the things that are suggested in the book may not work for you and your baby. And exactly as you said, Lucy, whatever works for you in terms of you getting rest and your baby getting rest is what you do. Sometimes mums worry that if they don't establish routines with their babies will never be in a routine. That's not the case. It's really important, as much as you can, to kind of go with the flow of where you're at with your baby, particularly in that first year of their life, because they change so much. As with Charlie, even at 9 months, he's a different little man than he was on day one. And and as you know from Juliet too, when you have kids, the day they're born and their first birthday, it's 12 months, but it's a huge amount of time in their lives. And if you think about all the skills and the developmental progress they've made in that year, it's really remarkable. So there's so much going on for them in terms of their development. And you're trying to help them establish routines, and routines are very important. It's really important that babies have familiarity, and that gives them a sense of stability and safety. But sometimes trying to impose a routine on a baby may not work so well for your baby, and that's no problem. That's not a reflection of them or you or your efforts. It might be about thinking, okay, well, look, I'm going to do exactly as you said, Lucy. I'm going to do what I need to do so that he gets rest, and actually I get rest too, and that's really important. So trusting your own instinct around your baby is the best guide. Your maternal instinct is so important, and I'm always really impressed with the mums that I meet around their maternal instinct, and just how much knowing you have about your baby. No one's going to know your baby as well as you do, so it's really important to remember that. But yeah, it's a really good example of just doing what you know is right for you and the baby, and knowing that actually in this moment the priority is that we both get rest, and the routine will come. It'll come.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's so funny though, I do remember when I had Juliet and the doctor saying to me, you know your baby more than anybody else. It's like, no, I don't. I don't know this baby. Why is this baby doing this? But it was just exhaustion, and it was overwhelm, and it was just, it is hard. But another thing on sleep, and I know again with COVID and financially it's probably difficult for some people, but when I was pregnant, I was saving up for my night nurse. I got a night nurse, and she came
amazing
2 or 3 times, and it just transformed. I saved it for those moments where I was like, I just don't think I can do this anymore. And then you just get the full night's sleep, and it was so that would be something as well, if you can. And even instead of gifts, instead of the baby grows and the toys, maybe ask for a night nurse fund or something, because
absolutely
it really changed things for me this time around. And again, only learned that because of the experience with Julia. We have another question.
Brilliant.
And this is from a pregnant mama, so congratulations. So she's first-time mum, 33 weeks pregnant, and she has anxiety around labour. So she's saying, although you can have preferences as to how it goes, there's no way to plan. It is out of our control. Any tips on how to keep yourself calm and be okay if things don't go according to your preferences? I feel like I'll be questioning everything once the baby is born. Are they too hot, too cold? Are they getting enough milk? She's hoping to breastfeed. Any tips on how to manage this and stop yourself panicking and working yourself up? She's saying she's making herself sound like such a warrior, which she's not, but pregnancy and babies can change all of that. She's told she's a very laid back person, but feels that this might change when Baba arrives.
Okay.
What's on that?
So it's really normal to feel anxious in pregnancy, particularly as you come towards in your last trimester, when you're coming towards the end of your pregnancy. It's really, really normal. It's very appropriate that you start to think about your labor and feel a little bit of anxiety, because a little bit of anxiety is really healthy for us. It gets us activated, it gets us making plans and thinking about things, and while feeling very anxious is very unpleasant for all of us, a little bit of anxiety kind of gets us going. So there's an evolutionary reason for that, and generally as well in pregnancy, our mood levels and our anxiety levels can kind of dip and up and down a little bit over the course of your pregnancy. That's also really normal. So very normal what this mom is experiencing, and thanks a million for that question, because it's really common. It would be concerning if you weren't feeling a little bit anxious about your labor. And it's such a tricky one, because what your mum said in her question is absolutely right. We can't control any of this, and that can be really overwhelming and feel quite scary to think about, because we live in a world, and where we have some control over things. So if I want to achieve something, I'm going to put the work in, and I'm going to have a plan, and I'm going to follow that plan, and I'm going to get the result that I want. Unfortunately, having a baby doesn't work that way. So it is really important that you do everything you can to mind yourself in your pregnancy and be thinking about your labor and what kind of strategies might help, and things like hypnobirthing and gentle birthing, where you're using your breath and you're thinking about managing the experience of your labor in terms of the pain that you might be feeling, or absolutely will be feeling, and how you might respond to that. All of those things are extremely important to do, and a really good idea. But ultimately, as much effort as you may put in, and as much of an idea as you may have about the type of labor that you'd like to have, nobody can guarantee, including you, that that's going to happen. And that can be that in itself is very challenging. Neither you nor the midwives nor the doctors can anticipate or predict. Even when you're in labor, nobody can actually anticipate how your labor is going to progress until it's over and you can look back and know what your experience was. So one of the big things that I think is important to think about is, what are your expectations of yourself when you go in to have your baby? And that's a really important one, because if you have an idea that some women feel and talk about feeling like they failed in their labor experience because it didn't go the way they were hoping it would go, and then they feel, I failed at this job of being a mother before my baby before we've even gotten on this journey, and that would be what I would call distorted thinking, because that's not the case. So, but if you have a very high expectation of yourself, and maybe you don't, and maybe you're a bit overly critical about how you were in your labor experience, you're left feeling very bad about yourself, and that's not fair to you, because your body has done an amazing thing in carrying your baby to term, or whatever that might be, from 37 weeks on, and you have gone through the process of laboring, irrespective of how your baby's born in the end, whether you have a vaginal delivery or your baby is born by cesarean section, whether you use pain relief, whether that's in the form of gas and air or epidural. Your body and you are working really hard. And the other really important part of that equation is your baby. And we don't always think about our babies as part of that journey of the labor, because your babies also have to labor as well to come out vaginally, if that's the way they're coming. And sometimes babies, and there's so many obstetric reasons that you may not have the delivery that you were hoping for. And I'm not a midwife or an obstetrician, so I'm not the right person to go into that. But how you feel about yourself after that is really key. And if you're able to say to yourself, look, I worked incredibly hard, and yes, I'm disappointed that I didn't have the experience that I was hoping for, But nonetheless, I worked really hard, my baby worked really hard, and hopefully we're here safe and well. And that's what's most important. And I'm going to really give myself huge credit for that. So that's, I suppose that would be one thing I would say is really important. How do I feel about myself in this journey? How am I talking to myself? Am I being compassionate towards myself? Am I being a little bit critical of myself? Do I have expectations of myself that maybe aren't completely fair, or maybe are a little bit unrealistic? And if you have a think about that, that's one of the biggest things I think that can really help, because there's very little of any of this that we can control, but I can certainly check in on how I talk to myself and what kind of self-talk I use. So am I compassionate, or do I tend to be a little bit more overly critical? And that can be a really key part of this equation in terms of managing the uncertainty and the unknown of the labor and the lack of control, which can be an overwhelming experience. And if I can sit in that and tell myself, this is, I'm doing a really good job here, this is really difficult, certainly when it's your first baby, I couldn't have anticipated what this would feel like, and I'm going to be as open to this experience as I can be, and as flexible in my outlook as I can be. So thinking about, okay, well, I would prefer not to have an epidural, but equally if I have one, I'm doing it because I need it, and that's okay too. So it's just really important to think about how I talk to myself in this, and maybe and having that experience before your baby comes can be really helpful in terms of just thinking about that. So yeah. I feel like I've gone on for a long time there, Lucy.
No, but I think, no, sorry, I like to, yeah, no, I think the reason why I think that's so important to hear is because that the preparation for that labor and the way you talk to yourself and the way you deal with it, I think also then is the same for when your new baby arrives.
Yes, absolutely.
When it comes to control, when it comes to how you talk to yourself, because the fact that mom is able to, at this first time mom is pregnant, to be able to acknowledge that it's out of your control now is, I think, is really good, because it helps you then for labor, but then also when the baby arrives, that you aren't in control of this, as you said, this little human being who has his own or her own schedule and her own temperament. And you, as soon as you kind of realize, if you go with the flow with the baby, then it does make things easier.
Yeah. And equally, after the second part of your mum's question around, thinking about what it might be like when the baby is here, you're of course going to feel anxious about your baby, because certainly if you haven't done this before, it's all new, everything is new. And also, even if you are pregnant or expecting or have a number of children, Lucy, how different every little person is. So it's really important to acknowledge for you as a mum to be that I'm going to get to know this little person. So what happens when we're in pregnancy is that you are going through not only the physical pregnancy, but you're also psychologically going through a big transition, because you're psychologically preparing to welcome this little person into your life and to make room for this little person in your life, both emotionally and physically. So you will have an idea, you might have an imagination of what this little baby might look like or might be like, and then the reality of the baby is going to be in front of you, and your imagining might be really different to the reality. It might be very similar, but either way, you're going to get to know this little person, and you and this little person are going to get to know each other. And of course, you're going to worry about, are they too hot, are they too cold? And you're going to go through your checklist when they cry. Are they wet? Do they need to be changed? Are they hungry? Do they have a little pain in their tummy, or do they need to be winded? Are they too tired? All of that kind of stuff. And then sometimes babies cry for no particular reason, and they're just a little bit out of sorts. And the other thing that happens for mums when they have their babies is that your brain chemistry changes. So you become really tuned into your baby's cry. And when your baby cries, you get anxious. And that again is an evolutionary response, because these babies are vulnerable. Babies don't survive on their own. They need adults, they need caregivers to respond to them and mind them and nurture them. So you're going to feel a little bit anxious when your baby cries, because that's nature's way of you responding to your baby to soothe them, and also to soothe yourself, and to feel calm again. So you are absolutely going to feel a little bit more anxious when your baby comes. That's really normal. You're going to be a little bit more worried about Are they all right? But as you get to know your baby, you're going to get to know their movements and their noises and their different cries, and you're going to, before you even leave the hospital, you're probably going to know a lot more about your baby than you even think you know. So it's really appropriate that this mum is thinking about that and wondering about that. And it's just really important, again, in that period after your baby comes, just to note that. And again, how am I talking to myself? Am I being what are my expectations of being a good mum? What does good mean to me? Am I looking to be, perfect? What does perfect look like? Perfect doesn't exist, by the way. So what we talk about in mental health in terms of parenting and mothering is the idea of being good enough. And good enough is exactly where you want to be. Because the other guarantee is, when you have a baby, you're going to make mistakes. Parents make mistakes all the time, and babies are going to make mistakes, and children make mistakes, because we're all human and we're fallible. So then it's about, when I make a mistake, I need to, acknowledge that. And if I need to apologize to somebody, if I've spoken harshly or whatever it might be, but in a compassionate way, then I can say to myself, why did I do that? What's going on? Am I a bit overwhelmed? Am I taking on too much? Am I expecting too much of myself? Am I not maybe letting other people help me more than a little bit more? Or if people ask me, can they do anything for me? Am I saying, no, I need to do it myself? So am I putting a bit too much pressure on myself? So the really important response is, again, how am I with myself? How do I talk to myself? Am I being compassionate to myself? And a bit like the way you're going to soothe and mind your babies, it's the same idea for yourself. Am I soothing myself? Am I minding myself? It's really important to do that.
Yeah, and I suppose the fact that you are having this natural response of the anxiety and you're worried about, that's just showing what an amazing mom you are.
Absolutely.
And you have these
Yes.
you want the best for your baby, but it's just, as you said, managing, I suppose, that, which is harder when you're exhausted. But I love that about how you speak to yourself. Yeah. And I don't know, would it almost help, like I'm quite a visual person, like to almost put signs up on my door saying you're doing a great job, or
yes,
and to almost write them to yourself before the baby arrives, saying, this too shall pass. You are amazing. You just need a full night's sleep. Because you forget it. You're as you said, the chemistry in your brain, and that's really interesting to hear about why it happens. I think it's always good way to understand it. So
yeah.
Fascinating.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, it's really, really powerful to write things down. So sometimes some people love to journal. They keep journals and they'll keep a diary of their lives, and they'll write in it regularly. But others don't. And certainly when you're in a place where you don't have a huge amount of time to reflect because you're so sleep deprived, exactly as you said, Lucy, it's a really good idea to write things down, to put up some things that will just remind you, yes, this is temporary. This is really difficult at the moment. I am really sleep deprived, and I'm not going to underestimate the impact of that on how I'm feeling or how I'm thinking. So yeah, it's a really, really good idea to do something like that. Or even some women, will have some nice like visuals around them of places that they like to go, that they just feel makes them feel better. And you may not get to go to those places after your baby comes, and anything that you can do to just mind yourself is really important. Because one of the things, so when you become a mother, you assume this new role, and this new job, certainly if it's your first time, is a job that you've never been in before. So it takes a little time to kind of try that on and see what that's like. And sometimes women feel a little bit lost in that, and they miss their old selves. They miss the people they were before they had babies, and that is totally normal as well. And sometimes women feel bad about that. They worry that means they're not a good mom if they're missing life before they had their babies. But life changes so massively when you have children, and things that you could do very easily before, you can't anymore. And it's all right to feel the loss of that. That's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person or a bad mother. It makes you human, and it's an acknowledgement that life is very different now, and I have to learn how to be in this role of being a mother, and what that means for me. So all of those things are in the mix as well. So it's really important to mind yourself, because everyone will be very busy minding the baby and asking you about the baby. And sometimes mums have said to me, like, I feel a bit invisible, nobody asks me how I am, it's all about the baby. And that's lovely, but it's also really important to ask how mums are too, because you're equally important and you're doing such an important job. So yes, it's really important to use any strategies you have to remind yourself that you're doing a really good job.
And can we just go back a bit to when we were talking about that first question and the mum about being so exhausted and wondering if she has postnatal depression? Because I'm interested in that area between being okay and postnatal depression.
The flags that you would look out for to know that actually maybe this is not, you know, normal or typical, are when you, so say you might be feeling a little bit anxious, and you might start to notice that when your baby is sleeping, you can't sleep. You maybe feel like you need to be doing lots of cleaning around the house or cooking or doing all the laundry or watching the baby because you're worried that the baby is going to stop breathing, and you just can't find any sense of calm, and you feel very anxious all the time. That would be something that wouldn't be healthy for you. If you find, because also you're not getting to rest and sleep, even at nighttime, if you find that when your baby is sleeping you're still really awake and you might feel a little bit wired, you might feel a little bit agitated, you notice that there's a lot of thoughts in your mind, you find that you can't kind of quieten your mind, you can't quieten your mind enough to actually go to sleep, those wouldn't be healthy things for you to be experiencing, and maybe a sign that you need a bit of extra support. If you're feeling a little bit low in yourself because you're sleep deprived, when does it get a little bit more concerning would be, like we were talking about before, Lucy, when you're maybe, you know, finding that you don't enjoy things like you did, you don't have any interest in things, you feel a little bit disconnected, you might feel a little bit numb, you don't maybe feel so connected to your baby, you might be very feeling very distant from your partner if you're doing this with somebody else. You may start to notice that you're very critical of yourself, and you might be starting to really give out to yourself and have thoughts of, you know, I'd be better, my baby would be better off if I wasn't here. You might start to realize that you're thinking about what you might do if you to harm yourself in any way. You might have thoughts of self-harm. Anything like that would be a sign that you're not in a good place and you would benefit from some support. And I suppose the other piece around that is this idea of what we call intrusive thoughts. So those thoughts that come into our mind that are maybe a little bit scary, or we might have an image of doing something to harm ourselves or a baby, and we get very caught up with that and we worry that we're going to actually do something. And I suppose the thing to say about intrusive thoughts that we have that come into our minds that upset us, or that are very very, you know, maybe a little bit shocking, would be called intrusive thoughts, because they're unwanted thoughts. And we have thousands, tens of thousands of thoughts go through our minds every day. You know, we don't track them all, but the ones that we do track tend to be the ones that we maybe are more emotionally charged by. So if we're feeling a little bit more vulnerable, so particularly after you have a baby, we do feel more vulnerable because we're trying to figure all of this out, and we have the responsibility of a new baby. And it's normal to feel overwhelmed at times with that responsibility. And sometimes you might have a thought of, I could do something to harm my baby. Women worry that means something about who they are as parents, and that's not the case. We have intrusive thoughts all the time. The reason we don't get so caught up with them is because they don't have any emotional relevance. They kind of go in and out, and we don't get tied to them. So sometimes when we're feeling more emotionally vulnerable, we can get caught up with certain thoughts. And the really important thing to remember is a thought is just a thought. It's not a fact, or it's not a predictor that we're going to do something or act on that thought. But it can be very disconcerting when we have those thoughts, but they're really normal. Mums, particularly new mums, have these thoughts, they come into their minds. It's really normal. It's really normal to have intrusive thoughts anyway, at any point in time. It's because our brains are weird and wonderful places, and they're constantly working, and we're constantly thinking. We're aware of some thoughts, we're not aware of others, and sometimes certain thoughts we can kind of get emotionally charged by, and we kind of grab them and we hold on to them, and they may be unhelpful, and we start to worry and make meaning of them in terms of, what does that say about me that this thought has come into my mind? So if you're worried about anything like that, then it is really important to come and speak to someone.
No, I think that's really important. And just talking about those intrusive thoughts, and I think it's such an important message to get out there, that it doesn't mean that you're going to do something. So and as soon as you can get those thoughts, I think, out of your head, and maybe you talk to somebody about it, even like your partner or friend, or GP or yourself, and just get them out of your head, then you can hear yourself say them and they almost sound so ridiculous that then you can just kind of dispel them. Or obviously then maybe you do need to go and talk to somebody like yourself.
And sometimes when we have those thoughts, our natural response is to say, don't think about it, push it away, don't have that thought. It's a bit like if I say to all of you, don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think of a pink elephant. I'm thinking of a pink elephant. I don't know about anyone else. So the more we try and push thoughts away, the more they come back on us. So it's really good to share, exactly as you said, to share how you're feeling and what you're thinking with other people. It's good to sometimes get a check-in or get someone else's perspective. And sometimes if you notice that those thoughts keep coming up and you keep getting really caught up with them and they keep mulling over in your mind, it may be a sign that actually I'm really tired, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm worried about how I'm doing, and that's a good enough reason to come and talk to someone and just get a bit of support. And you may find that you don't need to come and talk to you don't need to come back and talk to us. So if you feel like you would benefit from a check-in, whether it's with a friend, family member, a trusted other person, or the service in your maternity hospital, don't hesitate to reach out and ask for that support. And even like your public health nurse, your GP, anyone that you know is trusted that you can speak to, because trust me, GPs and public health nurses have heard all of this before as well. So and if they feel that, I think maybe you'd benefit from a bit of additional support, like I said earlier, they can also refer into us too if they felt it would be helpful for you.
We just had another question come in. So would you mind asking Aoife how to deal with anxiety around my baby girl starting creche? I've been with her every day since she was born 10 months ago. I've barely been away from her because of COVID, and it's daunting to think about sending her to creche and not seeing her all day when I go back to work. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, it's really hard sending your kids to creche, particularly for the first time, and even when it's not your first baby. Every time you're I suppose moving out of that maternity period or maternity leave, and you're going back to work and everything's changing again, it's a really big change. And we don't always love change, because change means the ending of something else. So I think one of the biggest things to say is babies take their lead from us as adults. They look to their trusted adults to understand how they should respond in situations. So your baby will take her lead from you. And of course she's going to be upset when you bring her in first, because it's new and it's unfamiliar, and she knows you so well and she's familiar with the routines that you have at home. But that doesn't mean that she won't be soothed and that she won't be okay when you're gone. And sometimes as well, when you come back to collect her, she may seem okay for a minute, and then she may realize, actually, where were you all day? And she'll get upset again. And that's really normal. And the most important thing is just to, as you've already been doing, soothe your baby and reassure them that it's okay. And it's all right for babies to get upset. As mums, you don't want your babies to get upset, because you want them to be content. But it's really good for them to know what it's like to be upset, and also to know that actually I can be okay again, and I have people who are going to help me with that. So that's really important. And they learn that from the beginning when they cry because they're hungry or they're tired or they need their nappy changed, and you respond to them and you soothe them, and they know that when they're upset they have someone who helps them with that. And this is another, I suppose, phase of that, when you're entering into a new period with your baby, when you're returning to work and your baby's going to creche. So it is really upsetting. There's no getting around that, because it's a change, and it's all right to feel all of that. And again, it's really important to think about, how do I talk to myself with all of this? How do I mind myself in all of this, and know that yes, it is upsetting. And some mums are very happy to go back to work. Other mums just maybe, everyone's different. So some mums go back because financially it's important that they do, but maybe they'd have a preference to stay at home with their babies, or maybe work part-time, or whatever the the combination might be. So even you might even really want to be back in work, but still be upset at this change and not seeing your baby so often during the day. And, you know, to be quite frank, working outside the home is often a real break. You actually get to have a cup of tea from start to finish without it going stone cold. You get to have a lunch. But it is a real time of transition, and it's absolutely fine and totally understandable for you to be upset by that, and that your baby will be a little bit upset in just the settling in period. But if you feel that you have a good place for your baby and you're happy and feel confident in the creche and the staff there, then your baby will likely be okay after a few days and will adapt to this new routine. So very best of luck with that, and you just mind yourself in that, and your baby will, I've no doubt, be well minded anyway. So just mind yourself too.
And I think that's kind of been the message of the morning, hasn't it? It's kind of like taking it slow, you know, all these transitions are change, and as you said, you know, where change can be difficult, so we need to mind ourselves, check in with ourselves, and talk to people. And you know, I really hope the job that you're going back to has support there for parents going back to work, and if not, maybe find your own kind of support group that you can kind of talk to and share experiences with. And I think that's, you know, that's our message, and that's your message, that there is support out there, and
absolutely,
we deserve to be supported. You know, we are bringing these new little people into the world, and we deserve to be supported, and it is out there. So thank you so much, Aoife. We really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been really great, and thank you, mums, for joining us and for all your brilliant questions, and we will see you soon.